Okay, I think we'll get started then. Welcome everyone. Any public questions, Julie?
No, and no
Okay.
apologies.
All right, so to welcome Tom Lake and Yvonne as observers, so very much welcome. Apologies?
No apologies.
Okay, declarations of any other business? Declarations of any interest? Minutes of the meeting on the 12th of September, any corrections, please? Okay. Action log and matters arising. I can't see anything which is other than done or in train, so unless anyone's got anything they want to raise. Okay, well, let's move on to item 6 under the quality section. Patient story, building resilience and valuing emotions projects. And Debbie, I'll hand over to you, and we welcome, I think, Natasha as well.
Natasha and Jane are both here to present today.
Welcome.
And yes, I will leave Natasha to introduce, but yes, this is a story around Brave, patient story around Brave, showing, and also just to note they are at the HSJ Awards later on this week. So
excellent.
So good luck.
Okay.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, and thank you, Martin, and nice to see you all again. I'm Natasha Bertoglia. I am a consultant psychologist in Slough locality for adults. And over to Jane.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting us. My name's Jane Barker, and I'm a counselling psychologist.
And we're going to share with you, about our Brave service, which Jane is kindly going to be sharing the presentation. Once you get that. We normally always have our service users and our ambassadors, our volunteers alongside us whenever we talk about the service. However, today we decided to do it slightly differently and to use the video instead, where actually those voices have been captured and recorded. So you'll be hearing them, but obviously to protect confidentiality and anonymity, we decided against it, given it is recorded and it is public. So, building resilience and valuing emotions after domestic abuse is a specialist psychological service. We have developed it over the last kind of 4 or 5 years. Started in Slough, but now we are actually covering the whole Berkshire, all 6 localities in Berkshire. We are funded by the Thames Valley Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and through kind of Ministry of Justice funding that comes to us in Berkshire Healthcare to actually deliver the service. Initially, just to say, we were funded by Slough Borough Council and their domestic abuse department. So we kind of initially built those connections locally through co-production in SBC, Slough Borough Council, and then connected wider to the east of Berkshire. And we were very lucky because our project was so successful and the voices of our people were listened to. Hence, we got the funding from MOJ and our lovely commissioners, Thames Valley Office of the Police and Crime Commissioners. So, what are we about? Again, our people on our video will be kind of telling us a little bit more about the project itself, but Jane will just give a quick overview of what we do.
So we're a programme all about relational trauma. It's kind of difficult to capture everything we do, so we've had a go here. It starts off after triaging, which we'll talk about later, with our 12-week intensive therapy programme. That is all evidence-based, of course. That is single-sex groups. We have women's groups and men's groups. So Brave 2 is our men's service. Following that, because of the ongoing challenges of our client group, we have our Brave Embrace offering, which is modelled on the Embrave programme in Slough, which is part of the Recovery College. And in Brave Embrace, that's an opportunity to consolidate the skills that they have learnt in the 12-week programme. It's co-facilitated by our Brave ambassadors that you see at the top there. So they are people with lived experience who have been through all of the programme and who are trained up proper BHFT volunteers and real cornerstone of our programme. We're so lucky that we are able to create a Brave community. So we are aware that people, instead of being on a waiting list, we have created an opportunity for them to start with us immediately with some therapeutic support. So as soon as we have triaged them and assessed them as suitable, they are welcome to come into the Brave community and start their journey with us.
And very much based on co-production, as Jane said. So we are valuing people with lived experience, and we're actually constantly listening and responding. So constantly adapting. Whereas we are using evidence-based psychological therapy approaches, but the adaptation goes on through co-production constantly. So whatever is needed, we try to find a way to fit what we as experts know alongside people's voices. So it's that process, the kind of co-production is ongoing process. It's not just one-off. It's not a state where you want to be at. It's ongoing and it's constantly changing. It's a process. And we have managed to actually develop community connections through domestic abuse specialist focus. So we're very much known now. We've got one of the slides telling you how many referrers we have now in our communities. And of course, trauma-informed. And trauma-informed meaning we do take into consideration what has happened to people rather than what is wrong with people.
So how big is the problem? Why is our service there? So around 7% of the female population, would you believe, have experienced domestic abuse. That's about 1.6 million women. 46% of adult female murders in England and Wales were killed in domestic abuse incidents. And 35%, so a large proportion of women sleeping rough, are doing that because they've escaped violence, according to one report. A figure that we're really interested in as well is that 26% of domestic abuse related crimes are against men. And that was the real impetus for us to ensure that we're being inclusive to everybody. And that was the trigger for us launching our Brave 2 service for men.
And why is psychological support so important? Well, mental health is almost a natural kind of progression from traumatic situation of domestic abuse, and that is both for men and women. And we've got some figures here, but interestingly, again, as Jane said, that was our learning was about men, and actually what happens to men in our kind of communities as a result of experiencing domestic abuse, which is very much still a lot of stigma and shame involved.
So our referral criteria, they must be, of course, be living in Berkshire with a GP in Berkshire, safely away from the alleged perpetrators, so that they have got the headspace to be able to think about themselves and not be on that fight and flight mode. They've got to be adults and willing to take part in our whole approach and be part of our community. And of course, they have to be showing that they're struggling with the psychological impact of domestic abuse.
And note our language, meaning we're not saying exclusion criteria. We're just saying people whose needs we cannot meet. And that is an example of co-production again, how we use the language. And people whose needs we cannot meet are people who are struggling a lot, for example, with substance misuse. That might have an impact on their ability to engage, or who are struggling currently with higher risk due to environment they are in, or people whose needs might be better met by secondary specialist mental health services. And of course, everything is on individual basis. It's person-centered, individualized.
So this gives you an idea of where we get our referrals from, and this is data since we began in 2019. So over that period of time, we've had 925 referrals. That was to the end of September. You can see it's heavily weighted towards Bracknell, Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, Slough, because that's where we started, just with funding at East Berkshire. But now we cover the whole of the other areas as well. There's an awful lot of work that goes in at this stage. So some of those people will end up where Brave is the most appropriate service for them. And others we will be referring on to other services. We will be liaising with our colleagues maybe in talking therapies or in mix for some of their programs, just to make sure that we are the best service for the people that are referred into us.
And this is just an example of one of our localities. How many different referrers, how many different agencies actually refer into Brave? So this one is from Slough, and you can see numerous colleagues we have out there that we have managed to get into kind of having knowledge about us, and how, you know, communities now are considering Brave as a point of, oh gosh, we need to actually help someone by referring them to Brave. And now we're going to be sharing with you a few minutes of our people's voices, basically. People have actually got together and pulled this descriptive video to share with others. Jane, we
I am
can't
a
see
member
the
of
video
Brave.
yet.
I have been through similar experiences.
Can you see it now?
Hey.
I understand what
Not
you've
yet.
been
Oh,
Oh, it worked earlier when we tried, 9:45.
okay.
We can hear it though, so
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, that's a step. Sometimes we can't hear it.
you see it now?
Yes, it needs to be.
Okay.
Right.
I'm going to make it bigger. Hang on.
Yeah, excellent.
I am a member of Brave. I have been through similar experiences. I understand what you've been through. We understand you. We, real people, have made this for you, so you know that you are not alone and you can take back control of your life.
The 12-week programme of Brave was building resilience and valuing emotions, was very, very valuable to me. I love that it was a stepwise approach. There were building blocks to build on what you'd learned, not just about what you're being taught, but what you learned about yourself each week. For me, my favourite part was talking about resilience. I realised I really needed to get a handle on that. And it's been really useful to me.
Brave 12-week programme gave us all an inclusive, non-judgmental, safe and supportive space in which we could talk openly about our personal experiences. We were all listened to with understanding, compassion and empathy. Each and every person in the group lifted each other up. The techniques given to help us normalise and understand emotions and reduce feelings of stress, anxiety or depression practiced regularly are vital to our healing.
I'm very happy to connect to you today. As a Black woman, I had a lot of reservations about joining Brave. First of all, I didn't think many people could relate to my situation. I felt like my situation was unique based on my race and based on the fact that I was a first-time immigrant and other factors, really. Right from the start of the meetings, I found the Brave meetings to be a very welcoming place, a safe space. Everyone was allowed to be themselves.
And then gradually, week by week, you suddenly realise that you're starting to let your guard down, and it's okay, and these people are okay, and this is a safe space. And I think the structure of the sessions, it was a set structure, there was no surprises, made us feel safe. So you had the check-in, then you have what you're covering, mindfulness, and then we check out. That set structure, everybody felt comfortable.
You will actually feel very willing to share your experiences, because you will find very quickly that it's your space, and how we support each other, how the women support each other will encourage you to also share your experiences and your advice as well. No matter where you are in your journey, no matter, as long as you have any sort of difficulties that you cannot share with other people, you cannot share with your family, or you cannot share with even a partner, this is the space for you to receive encouragement and to receive nourishment from other people who have been there and who have overcome their difficulties.
Brave is friendly and informal. The programme itself is built on strong foundations, and the structure of the course is designed to be attended weekly to build a solid understanding of the previous week's material. This weekly attendance also builds a rapport with the other members of the support group.
As an Asian woman coming from a different cultural background, but at the same time understanding what Brave is all about, it's given me an understanding and a boost of encouragement of understanding what trauma is and how to handle this. Space has always been a great way of understanding that what's going on, and that you're not alone.
And there's this beautiful warmth about the people in the group. It is such a positive group. There's always reflections on the teachings from the Brave programme and how implementation of some of those lessons has been beneficial in the week prior. And we reflect and consider how more of us in attendance might benefit in the same way.
Being a Brave ambassador for me is primarily to be able to give something back and to help others on this very difficult, quite often very lonely journey. One, to know that they're not alone. Two, to help them understand that they are stronger than they possibly believe. And actually, by being able to help people, or maybe make that journey less long or less severe, it is actually also part of my healing.
Don't be afraid. Everyone is really, really nice, and you'll find it really useful having people that understand what you've been through, and you'll learn a lot. Just give it a chance.
This is a right space to actually deal with whatever concerns you have.
Just do it. You've come a long way. You've got this far. Go for it. You've nothing to lose and everything to gain.
So that was a video that was created by our service users, and it's so lovely to hear their voices, actually, because I think they are, much more eloquently able to describe the impact that the service has on them. And the purpose of that video is to show to other women at point of referral, so that they are women who have had that lived experience speaking to other women with that lived experience. We are also creating one for men as well. That's being done at the moment. So outcome measures, we of course take outcome measures pre and post. Requal is one of them. You can see there the increase there. Core is the other one. And we also
we can't see it, Jane. So sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes, there's a couple of slides left.
Oh. There we are. So here are recall outcome measures that you can see. The other one we do is core, and we take qualitative data as well. And we've included some quotes at the end of this presentation for you to look at afterwards if you'd like to.
Absolutely. And just the final slide from us is that this kind of co-production and what we have been doing in BRAVE is part of the wider co-production in Slough mental health services that we have been engaged in for, gosh, over a decade now. So we have been doing a lot with different teams, different services, and have been recognised both locally and nationally. I have presented at different conferences and including, of course, when CQC comes to visit. We do always kind of pull together a group of people, our service users, to share their experiences of our service. And of course, on Thursday, as it's been said before, we are keep your fingers crossed, because we are hopefully, with a bit of luck, fingers crossed. Well, it's HSJ Award for Innovation in Mental Health that we have been shortlisted for. And I think we'll end here, isn't it, given the time? We've got another few slides, as Jane says. It's about more qualitative outcomes. Do we have time for questions, Martin?
Well, I was going to say, I'll just invite questions. It's a fantastic presentation, a fantastic program of work. I've just got one question, if I may, which is about funding. It's funded, not 3-year funding. Are there plans for long-term funding for this?
Yes, indeed. And unfortunately, our commissioners cannot give us the answer. Unfortunately, our funding is ending in March 2025 currently. So all our members of staff have fixed term contracts up to that point, but it's becoming more and more difficult, obviously, with planning. So yes, we are hoping. Our commissioners are very happy. Everything is fine. It's just whether Ministry of Justice will actually, and new government probably by that point, will decide to dedicate those funds to the Police and Crime Commissioner. Okay, so it remains to be seen.
Natasha, thank you. Got questions? Aileen.
Yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. Very inspiring, and it was a great way to hear the voices, to hear the people involved. So yeah, amazing, very inspiring. Just a clarification. So does domestic abuse include both physical and psychological abuse suffered? Because I think more and more in society, people are recognising the impact of coercive control and things like that.
Yeah, I'll answer that, Aileen. Absolutely. So, and probably the vast majority of the people who use our service have experienced coercive control and ongoing coercive control through the court system, through their children as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I thought that would be the case. Thank you.
Absolutely, spot on.
And I guess what is really worth also adding to that, isn't it, Jane, how much work we have been doing with the local police forces. And coercive control is something actually that our people developed a training package to work alongside the local police to help them actually understand what coercive control is. So we've got a whole training package now co-produced as well, that we have been kind of our way of engaging with the community and partners.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really important. Thank you. Good to hear.
Thank you, Aileen. Sally.
To what extent does your client group reflect the local demography, and whether in the groups you have to sort of finesse the input to be cognizant of the different cultural backgrounds of the group? And another question I wanted to ask actually was, I'm very aware children in these families are often traumatized, and whether there's anything available to the children, which I realise isn't your responsibility, but whether you could comment on.
Jane, would you like to comment on the first, and then about co-production?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are very conscious about the demographics. We did quite a bit of work looking at, for example, the demographics of Slough to see we're always interested in who's not in the room. And we're involved with quite a few different groups of people co-producing with them to make sure that everybody is able to access our services. We've got one of our group members actually who is going to be training up as a Brave ambassador herself, who is going to be going into, she's Asian British, who is going to be going in kind of representing Brave to different groups. So we're networking all of the time to ensure that absolutely we are providing a service for everybody. On the second point, we don't involve children, but we do network with other organisations across Berkshire who specifically do provide services for children, because you're absolutely right. They're recognised as the victims of domestic abuse as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Naomi.
Thank you, Jane and Natasha. I want to just explore this a little bit with you, kind of slightly more broadly, recognising that domestic abuse is a national issue. Indeed, as you've quite rightly pointed out, indeed it's a global phenomenon. We know that. So, in designing your programme, did you take anything in terms of best practice from elsewhere? We are not the only provider of a service like this. And then sort of conversely, clearly we're recognised, we've received awards. You've been externalising this programme, you've been sharing. Have you any insights into the uptake of our best practice elsewhere?
Jane, would you like to answer the first part, and then I'll go for the second?
Yes, indeed. So neither Natasha or I were there on the very onset of the programme. So I'm not sure what best practice was taken from elsewhere, but I can tell you that actually, in our experience, there is nothing out there for the psychological impact of domestic abuse. There is a lot of other things out there for domestic abuse. If you look at the DA bill, it's full of things about focus on homelessness, for example, and support through the courts, all sorts of things, but actually just nothing on the psychological impact of domestic abuse. So the only thing out there really was the Freedom Programme, which is about perpetrator behaviour. And we go to all of the Freedom Programmes in the county to meet and talk to the women there, to say, you've focused on the abuser, and now we want to focus upon you. So there was just nothing that we found out there. So we started from scratch, looking at evidence base of what to do with relational trauma, and using our skills as psychologists to look at it from that aspect.
And we have been connecting to NHS England and Minister for Domestic Abuse, to Nicole. We've been sharing emails, and they've included us in their kind of newsletter they have to all the psychological services in England. We are also connecting, I mean, now incredibly connecting, actually. That's the kind of the current piece of work we are doing to do with men and domestic abuse. We are connected to the professor at a local university in West London, who is actually coming on the 30th of November, if anyone is interested. We've got for the International Men's Health Day, Mental Health Day, we are doing a morning of actually reflecting on domestic abuse and impact on men in Slough. We might actually share the link later on if you want to sign up and come along and kind of talk to our actually members and hear what is the impact. Because, for example, you're absolutely right, Naomi. There are so many bits and pieces of evidence that we have had to actually collect and pull together. For example, men's program is very different to women's program, because obviously status of men in our society is very different. So we're talking about what is their understanding of masculinity, and what are they supposed to be doing as per society norms, and how does that then impact upon them if they have been part of domestic abuse. So we have had to adjust and adapt our evidence base according to actually what we have been finding out from our people.
Fantastic. I mean, it's not just a brilliant service, but you're trailblazing at the same time.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you, Naomi.
Let's hope.
Julian.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the presentation, Jane, Natasha. Good luck for the award ceremony. One of the things that I was thinking about, you talked about where your referrals were coming from. Obviously, the fact you established in the East sort of first, but given the prevalence of domestic abuse, are you not going to get overwhelmed? I mean, where are you at the moment in terms of that demand capacity? Have you got long waits? What's it looking like? You just, not the detail, but perhaps just the flavour of where we're at in terms of that. That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
I think the first part of that question, kind of with regards to the waiting list, is really important to emphasize that as soon as we noticed people actually starting to wait a bit longer than we wanted them to wait, we actually came up with co-produced Brave Community that actually offers people to come along and meet with others and people who have completed groups. So we've got a way of managing waiting lists in a kind of much more engaged ways. Nobody's ever waiting somewhere on some wait list and that we lose understanding and knowledge of them. So there are no waits, basically. That's what we offer the service right away. We meet with people, we assess, and we offer something. And that is something we had to co-produce. In terms of being overwhelmed, Julia, you're absolutely right. We're a very small service. We've got very few clinicians. We're all working part-time. So that in itself is quite an issue. And as we have, as you're saying, established ourselves in the East, now establishing ourselves in the West brings us further challenges, because actually, not only that it's a number of people who are coming to us that has increased, but also the needs are kind of starting to show that we are supposed to be responding to, such as LGBTQ plus community, that we actually have found that have specific needs with regards to domestic abuse. So how do we now meet that group of people's needs? How do we meet the group of people who might have neurodiversity? How do we meet all those actually further kind of needs that are coming out of our community? And of course, each area geographically is quite different. Jane, anything to add to that?
No, I think you've summarised it well. I mean, I would say that we bend over backwards to deliver the service that is required by the people who come to us. So, for example, we started doing evening groups, offering those because so many of our women are working full time. So we're very aware we cover the whole of the county. So our face-to-face groups, we run 4 women's groups at a time and usually 1 man's group as well. So half of those would be face-to-face. And we move them around the county depending on where demand is. It's not the easiest thing for us as clinicians, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. The same with the evening working. So you're right, Julian. We're so fortunate though, because we're in this fantastic network within the NHS. So we can also, sometimes it would really be helpful for people to have some individual work. So we've got talking therapies. Then we liaise with the therapist there to make sure we're doing a joined up care plan together. And so they start with that and then they come to us, or we've got the Managing Emotions program. So there are ways of managing it to make sure that nobody is left waiting. They are getting something. And of course, we've got our Brave Community. And Brave Community means that they can come as soon as they've met us and been assessed, and they can meet there the facilitators who will be delivering the program. They can meet people who are already attending a group, so they can hear and get a motivation from them. They can meet people who have completed a group, and they can meet our Brave ambassadors. So we're combating the isolation that they so often feel through, especially coercive control, and we're able to give them something straight away.
Well, look, Jane, Natasha, thank you very much. It's a brilliant programme, really impactful, and I'm sure it's extremely well valued by all those who are involved. And indeed, it's delighted to see that the Thames Valley Police, have a leading role in this to join up across the services. And we wish you, I know, every success with your HSJ award. So good luck with that. And let's hope we can continue to expand the service and get funding for long-term support. So thank you both very much indeed. Excellent item. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We shall log out now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So after that fantastic piece, we now move on to 6.1 Staff Health and Wellbeing Update. Alex, do I turn to you?
Jane's going to introduce the update, and we have Steph with us as well for any questions and discussion.
Welcome, Steph. Jane, over to you.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say thank you to Steph, who does this work and has prepared this paper. But just to give you a little bit of context before I pass you over to Steph, this is really a paper to update and give assurance around the activity within the wellbeing plan, what we've done and what we're going to be doing. The work that we do here is all linked primarily into making this a great place to give care, which is part of the trust strategy, and our progress is primarily measured via the staff survey. So particularly 2 areas: would you recommend this as a place to work, and do we take positive action on health and well-being? And traditionally we've had high scores in that area. As you know, we're doing the staff survey again at the moment, so let's see what our results come out as. Just to put some context around what's been happening, the team has continued to work hard despite their losing a key team member who was seconded to support another team that had a sort of critical need support in the ops area. And we have been transferring wellbeing matters to an in-house, dedicated in-house support team without the funding that we had previously from the system. So you know, we've been dealing with a lot of change within the team. So the activity, but it's good to see that the activity has continued to progress. And alongside that, I will also say that Steph and the team are also supporting the health and wellbeing strand at system level. The system have got health and wellbeing as part of their system, the Frimley system are particularly focused on this, and they're looking. Frimley system is looking at work that would complement our work and would be best done at system level. So they're also supporting that. I'll pass over now to Steph so she can pull out a couple of highlights that she might want to bring, and then we'll open you up for questions.
Super, thanks, Jane. Yeah, I just wanted to pull a couple of things out of the paper. One is the work we've done continuing to support staff around the cost of living. So we've brought in Salary Finance now as an external partner. So they provide 4 things for staff. So that's learning and education platform around finances, saving directly through salary, advances on salary. So if you've worked for 2 weeks, you can get an advance for a certain percentage of that, and then loans. And the loans aren't, if it's under £5,000, it will be matched to high street prices. If it's over £5,000, it may not be the best rate. So it's targeted to those with poorer credit scores that wouldn't be able to access that support elsewhere. And you can see from the data that I put in there, actually most of this has been for a debt consolidation. So it's been a really positive help for those staff. And it's something that we're not going to be targeting getting a high number of people using it. It's going to be the service is there for those that need it rather than about uptake. But it's something that we're tracking, and the first 6 weeks seemed positive. The long service awards are still going down really well, and you can see the number of awards that we've sent out now. I think it's 898 for the Berkshire Healthcare Milestones. So yeah, that's going down really well. Wellbeing Matters is doing a lot of work with that change into the internal only team. So we are losing staff members through that consultation process, but still. And we've also had some sickness in the team as well, but we're still managing to provide a good level of support across. And we're really seeing it up in the team areas. So we're seeing a lot of work happening out in the teams. And the team themselves have upskilled in areas like professional tree of life. They're just doing some ACT training so that they can bring this into the team work as well. And we're working really closely with the EDI and leadership team as well to make sure there's no duplications there. As Jane said, we've got the staff survey going at the moment that we lead on the sort of this bit, trying to get the response rates up, because the more response rates we get, it means the results are more meaningful. We're currently at 60.5 as of this morning. Last year we finished at 60.9, and then we went up to 65 afterwards once the the levers were taken out, etc. So we should be on track to have a higher response rate than last year, which is really, really positive, given that we don't finish until this time next Friday, sorry. And then finally, just want to bring up, I know last time I brought this, we were really looking at the evaluation of this, and it's something that unfortunately has fallen a little bit. We're really focusing on the data at the moment and bringing that in, and we're hoping in the next 6 months, where we've got a more stable workforce, we'll be able to start focusing on that evaluation a little bit more. And one of the things I want to start with that and making sure that we're more planned is looking at the NHS Health and Wellbeing Framework. So that's been updated relatively recently, and we need to update that. So we've got it in our plan to start in December to sort of build that out. I've actually taken some learning from the Bright Ideas event that happened last week, and how we approached it with the carers strategy, putting that into a questionnaire, and we're going to do that and send that out to all of our stakeholders so we can start doing that. Where are we at right now? And then what do we need to prioritise going forward? But really focusing on the activity data to at least sort of drive that activity for now and see where our gaps are. But yeah, that's just a couple of highlights I thought I'd pull out of the paper. But if there's any questions.
Steph and Jane, thanks so much. This is a fantastic piece of work, and the workforce issues is our #1 risk for the trust, the board. It's the thing we're most worried about, and so looking after our staff in any way we can is essential to our success. We've got some hands up, so Mark Day.
Yeah, when I was asked by Martin a couple of years ago to take on the role of the NED Wellbeing Champion, I was really keen to get alongside this because, as Martin's just said, I really do think that workforce is our top priority and key issue, and felt that this could be a real differentiator. And over those past 2 years, I've liaised and worked very closely with Steph, listening to the work that's doing. And what she's presenting to us today really is just a thin veneer over a whole raft of different things that they've been doing and other initiatives. And there's a real depth and quality there with the team that Steph leads on this. But as well as that internal perspective, I'm also a member of the South East Wellbeing Guardians group run by NHS England. And I find it fascinating to listen to other guardians and NEDs from other organisations who are really only, I feel, scratching the surface on this issue and don't have the depth and quality and the comprehensive programme that we see being presented to us here in front of us at the board today. So I really just wanted to say thank you to Steph and the team and to Jane for the enthusiasm that you've tackled this, and you really have done us proud in terms of treating this as a major initiative that can make that difference to our workforce. So thank you.
Thank you for those kind words, Mark. Sally.
Hi, Steph. We met last week at the Bright Ideas. I asked you lots of questions then, so I won't repeat that. But you know the numbers on page 23 when you say team support requests and staff support post-incident requests. Are they going up or going down? What would be the trend there? And also, can you just say a little bit about the staff support post-incident? Who's providing that and sort of how you think it's going?
Yeah, no problem. So the teams, it's a bit difficult because before May, we were providing for the entire of Berkshire Health and Social Care staff, not just Berkshire Healthcare. I would say we've actually gone up since then, but it's difficult because we're now looking at a different set of a group of staff. So we're now just looking at Berkshire Healthcare. So we can compare that trend, but it's a different audience. So we'll be looking, but it definitely feels like we are doing more work with teams now than we had done previously. And some of that's just going to be because of getting out into other organisations like RBH. It's harder and it's much easier to get into our own areas. So that's really positive. So the staff support post-incident, so that's provided by Wellbeing Matters. And actually they did that for Berkshire Healthcare even when we were providing it externally. So this was something that we started back in January 2020, I think it was. So if a staff member or a team experiences a incident, or either a serious incident or maybe an abuse or an assault, something like that, we're either raised by the manager or a DATEX is filled in, and that will prompt us to get in touch and say, is there some support needed? It's the psychologists that run that. They'll go in and do some psychoeducation, you know, normalizing the reactions, and then go into a period of waiting, but making sure that people know that that support is there if they need it afterwards.
Right, so it's a psychologist. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
that's very
no
helpful.
problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Rebecca.
Morning. Thanks, Steph. Yeah, it's a brilliant report, and it's really encouraging to see that the response rates for the staff survey seem to be going in the right direction. I was wondering whether there's anything specific that we've done differently that might have increased that engagement.
I think the last couple of years has been really different because we've really partnered with the HR business partners a lot closer. So the HR business partners really go out into the organisation and work with the managers and make it more meaningful. So we do a lot more around the you said we did at team level and at division level, service level, that I feel makes it more meaningful. There isn't anything though that we've changed from last year to this year that seems to be different. So I mean, I used to do the staff survey and be lead on that in another organisation, and to me it feels like it's this constant culture that we are building with things like Bright Ideas, with things like the all staff briefings and staff being able to ask questions. I think that constant iterative, everything we're listening to staff, that feels to me the biggest difference between that and making the really focusing on the lower levels. But there isn't anything that, you know, we've introduced a voucher or we've done this completely differently. It seems to be this slow iterative game, which I find really positive and inspiring, to be honest.
I would also add, I think, that we do talk a lot about the staff survey, not just when it's staff survey. So during the year, we talk a lot about, you know, findings from the staff survey. You know, when Alex has been leading on some of the anti-racism work, we have talked about, you know, why we're doing it and what we've seen in the staff survey. So I think people are hearing that we don't just see the results and put them in a drawer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Julian.
Yeah, thanks for the report. A decade ago, when I was doing induction, people would say, "Oh, what have you got for staff?" And it was a very easy answer. I'd say we've got a bit of OcuHealth, and then we got an employee assistance scheme, and that was pretty much it. Now we've got a raft of stuff that I can't even remember myself, even though I've read the kind of report. And when I looked at Nexus, you know, the intranet, and typed in wellbeing for today's presentation, it's a bit all over the place. The stuff that comes up, wellbeing champions and latest news and everything else. I think in my experience of this organisation, because we're so dispersed over many sites with many different working patterns, we've got a good offer, as Mark said, and I endorse his comments around that. I think the challenge now, and this is not just related to health and wellbeing, it's related to everything, is how we make sure that people really know and are able to take that offer in all teams. And we know that those, you know, working shifts, you know, not in corporate services, etc., find that more difficult. It's probably a remark back for Alex really to think about that internal community, because it's an internal communication issue, really simplifying the message, making sure people are able to take it up, because there are people who could benefit from this at the moment who are not. We know that. So I guess that's the next stage, really, making sure that we can really consolidate the information and make it easy for people to know the entirety of our offer.
Yeah. We've done quite a lot of work over the last year, which we continue to do now, called our Wellbeing Newsletter and Tour. So we've put it into a print version that we send out 3 times a year, and we go around with that to try and get that, you know, those that are on shift and on the front line, it's in a staff room, but that's still not going to get to everyone. A really interesting point that came up at the Brighter Ideas, because we asked for ideas about what we should do next, was about getting this information to those off on like real long-term sick where they don't have access to Nexus anymore, and those on maternity. So those are the big areas that we're looking at as well, of how can we get out to those staff that those are the ones that probably need the wellbeing support potentially more than others. So it's on our radar as well, working really closely with Sarah about that.
Great. Well, Steph and Jane, thank you very much. Most impressive piece of work. And I think for me, the one thing that characterises this trust it seems to me, is that we're genuine about what we want to do. And so these things aren't flash in the pan. It isn't about making a show. It's about doing the right thing and doing the right thing every day and continue to improve. So, and I think you reflected that in your comments, Steph, about the trust. So thank you very much. Let's hope we continue on upwards, as it were, in all things. And I'm very grateful, I'm sure we all are, for your work and your colleagues. So thank you, both of you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, 6.2 Patient Experience Quarterly Report. This is a one we do, as it says, we get every quarter. So Debbie, you probably just want to bring up the highlights.
It absolutely is, and hopefully the highlight report is self-explanatory. There's not a huge amount of difference. The one difference I noted was that we seem to have more dissatisfied people in terms of listening in Mental Health East, or feeling listened to. There is no other data to triangulate that, so we haven't seen more complaints, either formal or informal. And there's not a lot of written evidence in the reviews to understand what that means, so we are keeping an eye on that over this quarter. But other than that, everything is pretty much as it usually is.
Okay, any questions for Debbie? Comments? No, I think it's very clear, Debbie. Thank you for that. In which case we can move on. 6 monthly are you doing? Oh yeah, 6 monthly safe staffing report. Debbie, you again.
Yeah, so I recognise this is a lengthy report. It has to be. There are certain things that we have to have in it, but I have tried to capture in the highlight report what I think are the key kind of things that as a board you would be interested in. So I will welcome some feedback on that, really. Again, a fairly static picture. We have seen some improvement over the last 6 months in the numbers of shifts that have less than 2 registered, as in we're seeing less shifts with less than 2 registered. We had a peak over the summer, which we have every year, because not only do our staff have holiday, but our temporary workforce often work term time only or don't work all of the holidays. That is always a challenge for us. Other bit of positive, I would say, since the last 6 monthly report is that we actually got ward managers and permanent ward managers on all of our wards at Prospect Park, which is really good news.
Very good news.
And there is a new senior leadership structure in place over there, which I think is providing some really, really positive and strong support to our wards, where most of our staff are quite junior in their careers. I've included the declaration in the highlight report, something that Minu and I are required to make for the board, which I do think we were safe, not optimal at all times, but safe. The only other thing that's new in using the long-awaited from NHSE community nursing staffing tool. We've piloted it in 2 localities, West Berks and Slough, and we are currently rolling that out across the other 4 localities. The recommendation is you use it at least twice before you make any decisions on staffing. What it did show for both those localities was, as you would probably expect, if we were fully established as per what we reckon we need, then we would be absolutely fine for the demand and capacity. The fact that we have got some significant vacancy, particularly in West Berks, it's much less in Slough, means that they will be struggling to meet the demand for the service. But I think that's nothing we didn't know, but it's quite helpful to have those national tools. It's a national tool. Everywhere across the country will be using the same tool. People that are using it have had training in it. So the aim is that there's some objectivity in the use of that tool and the benchmarking around community nursing services and safe staffing for them. And that's all I wanted to say there, really. I'm happy to take any questions.
Debbie, thank you. Any questions or comments? A very clear report. Okay.
Was the highlight report helpful?
It was.
Because I'm happy to do it if it's helpful. Julian's laughing, but I am happy to do it if it's helpful and it pulls out what you want it to.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. And we note your declaration and on safe staffing. I mean, it's a continual, with workforce pressures, it's a continual problem, isn't it? I mean, it's not a magic solution, and it seems to me come down to the skill and professionalism of you and your senior colleagues in terms of managing day to day the challenges we have. So thank you for that. Okay. I've got to find my agenda again. I think we're on research and development. Minu.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, everyone. So this is the report. It's an annual report for 2022-23. It comes sort of slightly towards the autumn. In a sense, actually, I had the report, the draft version rewritten so that we could try and pilot the sort of new format and see how it works. And you'll see, from this report, it brings research much closer to our services and what we really do. And if I recollect, an ex-non-executive director always used to ask, so what is the value of research for Berkshire patients and Berkshire Healthcare? And I hope that this report reflects that under sort of our various strategy headings. So I'm not going to read these out, but what we've done here is summarize the whole range of research activities that we do. So the mainstays, of course, NIHR research, and we get funded. That forms, the majority of our budget for the research staff. But in addition, we do a significant amount now of collaboration with universities, organizations outside, which not only expands our research sort of sphere and range of studies that we can do, but also brings in some income and links in with the various services we provide. And then there's the internal research we do. Our various services encouraged to pick up research projects which actually directly affect positively our sort of patient outcomes, and hence the whole concept of research now has moved on from it's an intellectual exercise, sort of in the past, for universities and teaching hospitals to, research is now part of good patient management, and that's what we're trying to bring across in this report. So happy to take any questions here.
Alex.
Thanks. I just wanted to add the huge value of the research team under Kate Penhaligon, particularly at the intersect of innovation. So increasingly, I'm seeing we're being flooded by new digital technology innovations, but often those suppliers don't come with evidence of effectiveness, clinically or otherwise. And there's a real opportunity in the research team, and this research team are already helping us do that. But to build an understanding of the effectiveness of this new digital technology, they can help those startup companies and suppliers and us in partnership get best impact through research studies, access funding. So I think there's a very valuable arm in our research team around innovation progression. I just wanted to add that to Minu's report. Thanks, Minu.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Sally.
Thank you, Minu. A very comprehensive report. I wondered if we ever see in a consolidated way publications by our own staff, because that's quite important in terms of a certain energy within the trust, isn't it? And raising the trust profile, whether we actually collate those in some ways, and whether they go to some sort of, whether they come here or subcommittee.
Certainly. So the research and development, we have our governance meeting, our strategy meetings, where we actually list those projects where staff. So it's not every publication a staff does irrespective of research. We are not a publication database. That's for the library to do that. But if our research and development team with our staff have resulted in a publication, then it is highlighted actually by the R&D team. I was hoping one of the links would lead to that, but there's certainly a list that we have. If you're interested, our head of research could pass that on to you. But those are research projects, with the trust have supported, which have led to publications where our staff have directly engaged with that.
Yeah, I'd be quite. I'll email Kate. Thank you.
That'd be great. Absolutely. Thank you, Sally.
Yeah, Julian.
Yeah, just to say, yeah, I think it's really positive what the research team are doing. Not only, we've got some quite practical stuff here. I mean, I'm absolutely delighted, for example, we're doing research into Sharon. So, Sharon and internal innovation that came from a patient and clinicians having a conversation, and now our own team leading a piece of research in that kind of space to evaluate it. I think, it's good to know that we're using something that's effective. And secondly, I think it will also open the door, on the back of that evaluation, if it is positive, for other trusts to take it up as well. And then secondly, just to say that the thing I've seen about this team, and it's particularly since Kate's been here, is that research has often had an elitist tag to it, particularly amongst kind of rank and file members of the organisation. And I think Kate and her team are doing a really good job about breaking down the barriers and finding ways in which more and more people can get involved, however big or small, into research, demystifying it, and therefore becoming, as Alex said, a core part of our improvement approach, rather than something that sits separately in a separate bubble. And I think that's always a danger in trusts, and I'm really pleased. They're really approachable. They're often very visible, which is often wasn't the case, trying to interface with teams and encourage people to get involved. And I do find that exciting and encouraging, really. So, Minu, thanks for that, and please pass on my thanks to the team as well for that approach. I think it is the way to go. We need more and more people involved.
Thank you, Julian. Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, Minu. I'm interested in the context that you've provided up front in your report around the kind of state of the nation, so to speak, from the DHSC and the O'Shaughnessy review, and just a bit of insight from your good self about how that is impacting or might impact going forward for us as a trust.
Absolutely. I'm hoping, I'm very, very hopeful that this will open up sort of research opportunities for our team to pick up, because the whole idea now is that so there's a mental health side of it. There's expected to be a significant amount of funding going into opening up mental health research, and I've always been strongly of the opinion that mental health needs much more research than it has. Physical health research is, I think, decades ahead. So that is one area which I'm very positive. But this is, and this is a much bigger national strategy of sort of bringing up research into really making a difference for patient care and being sort of leading, the United Kingdom in the research sort of area. And we are almost prepared for that. I know Kate and the team, and I've been in discussions about looking for these opportunities as they come along. So not only good thing for, of course, the country and our place in world sort of research, but also for our team, because our sort of principles have always been, access, health inequalities and access inequalities, and to tackle that, and then how research will matter in clinical practice. And that's going to be the focus, I think, in the coming years.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Minu. Thank you. This is great, and as you know, as an ex-research person myself, I'm very supportive of this, and I actually do think it's important that we break down barriers between, as Julian was saying, the sort of elitist approach to research and research that everybody feels is part of. It's a sort of continuum, isn't it, from our quality improvement methodology through to more academic research, because we can solve some really important problems. And at quite a detailed level, brought up by staff like Sharon and other sort of things. So, but great, we look forward to ever more. Thank you. And I absolutely support the need for more funding on mental health research. I think that's been a poor relation. So thank you for that. Okay, 6.5, Debbie again, patient safety incident response policy and plan report. And this is we've discussed this before, but Debbie.
We absolutely have. This is the plan and policy that came to the in committee in September to allow people to have conversation and any reflections or comments. It's really here today for approval. It needs to be approved by our board before it can be approved by the ICB, and we can start the shift from the current 2015 SI framework to the new this new framework, which all organisations are required to do over the coming months. So I'm hoping that nobody else has got any more comments on it, having it's been socialised quite a lot, and that you're happy to approve it so we can take it forward.
Everyone content? Oh, Sally, you've got a comment. Sorry, Sally.
Debbie, as you and I know, this is quite controversial at a sort of national level, and I'm assuming at some point there's a sort of built-in review, evaluation, and then the possible, you know, that we would have to have a mindset of flexibility around this going forward. Is that your understanding as well?
I mean, it's a good thing, I think. I think it's absolutely, though, this is a fundamental shift from how we've done things for decades. And therefore, as I put in the highlight report, this for us is absolutely not set in stone, and we need to start using it and then be able to flex depending. So although the plan requires you to say you're going to do X amount of, you know, instant reports in this way, etc., you know, I've been always really clear that if we need to do an additional 1 or 2, then that's what we do. We've got to be driven by the needs of services, patients, loved ones on this, and this will need to be reviewed in sort of, you know, a year to 18 months to see how it's working. But it's a kind of bit of a line in the stand for a starter for 10, really, with our best guess, for loss of any other word, of how we think we can best utilise this new framework whilst being flexible within it.
Yeah, and sort of have some sort of review at some point. Thank you.
Okay, with that, is everyone content? I think, Debbie, you have it. You've won that. Okay, item 7, executive report. Julian, normally just take questions unless you've got anything you want to raise. I see we have a new Secretary of State.
Yes,
Atkins.
The papers were published before that news yesterday, of course, but we have a new Secretary of State, which we shall note, and we'll find more about. Although I think, to be fair, Martin, on that, on a serious point, the in-tray is the in-tray, isn't it? It'll just be the approach and how particularly Secretary of State wants to work with NHS England at a national level, and how those priorities will trickle down, I think, will be perhaps the changes we may or may not see, but we'll be able to have a better sight of that in a month or two. Quite interesting, I guess, Martin, because we just talked about, you know, in our service presentation, an element around sexual safety, which, you know, in terms of the domestic abuse, of which that is one element. We have been working for a long time in relation to this. It's obviously always very helpful when there's like a national support for these things, but it's important we obviously incorporate this into our existing kind of work. We know, particularly on, for example, our mental health wards, there are issues that you know, where our staff are sexually face sexual abuse from a variety of sources, really. And this year we talked about the staff survey, and having looked at the staff survey, there are now specific questions around this in the workplace. So if you remember, about 2 or 3 months ago, this made headline news because there was a report on surgeons where it's been known to be very prevalent for some time. You know, and people go, well, that's just surgery, but it'll be very interesting to see in Berkshire Healthcare where we may have pockets of this in a particular concern. So we'll find that out, and hopefully, I think, from the staff survey about where there may be issues that we need to attend to. Debbie, is there anything else you want to say in relation to this at this moment in time?
No, I think that's absolutely right. We're very much building this into what we're already doing in terms of violence and aggression work streams and sexual safety work streams that are already in place. But I did think it was the right message to give, that we were signing up to these commitments.
Thank you. And on RAC, obviously national issue across a lot of public sector buildings. This is our second, third real look into it. And the report on RAC that Paul's provided here is an insight into our estates, isn't it? Some we're very in charge of, some we're sort of leasing and kind of modern, and some we've got people operating out of third-party premises like GP practices and stuff. So it obviously has taken a little while to get that assurance, but at this stage it looks like, other than the school where there is RAC but there's a mitigation in place, we haven't been as impacted as others, which is sort of good news. And then the final one, I think, is a reminder, and I think it's quite helpful that, you know, we're a provider of mental health services, and, you know, if you think about the news and everything else, where the real pressures are and the real risk is, you know, maternity, ambulance, mental health and learning disability in that are the three areas that are particularly exposed post-pandemic. I would argue they were probably bubbling before the pandemic, if I'm honest with you. It's just that it's got worse. So it gives you, when we consider safe staffing and all those other issues, culture work, if mental health is regarded as one of the very highest riskiest areas, then it shows the importance of some of that stuff that we've just been talking about this morning.
Very good. Any further questions for Julian? Comments? Okay, thanks so much, Julian. Let's move on to performance, item 8, month 6 finance report, Paul.
Thank you, Martin. So in terms of finances to the end of Q2, we're still in a good solid position. So surplus of 600,000, which is 2 million better than plan. Plan for the full year 1.3 surplus. So we're on track and still forecasting that will deliver that 1.3 million surplus. A couple of highlights from the month just to note on elective recovery, which is funding associated with additional activity over and above a baseline target set pre-pandemic. We've got confirmation of numbers that have come through for Q1, and it got our own internal numbers through to the end of Q2. We're performing over the target that we were setting contracts. So we've recognised an additional 200,000 of income from Bob on that particular element. Pay costs remain underspent to the tune of 1.8 million for the first half of the year, and obviously that's after absorbing part year effect of inflationary pressures from Agenda for Change uplifts this year. In terms of workforce numbers, we've been broadly flat in terms of substantive numbers through the first 5 months. Month 6, we did see a notable increase in substantive numbers, so about 70 new starters net. About 65% of those numbers relate to new investments that we've agreed with commissioners, so in areas like talking therapies, CAMS, but also increase in internal areas like apprenticeships. We've also seen some increases in sort of core allocations which weren't linked to new investments, so some increase in numbers in health visiting and community nursing. Agency spend, we're about 500,000 up on last year. An element of that will be inflation, but year to date we're at about 3.1% of overall workforce costs for agency, which is still well within 3.7% NHSE target for where the cap should be in terms of level of agency expenditure. OPES fell in September to an average of 21, but spend still remains above plan, and is obviously this report's dated September is more of a pressure now, and that will come to that in subsequent months reporting. From a capital perspective, we're 0.6 million behind our 2.5 million year-to-date spend plan, so not hugely concerning. We do expect to spend full allocation, and at the moment we've got a forecast overspend on our overall allocation of 300,000, which we'll work through with ICB colleagues before the end of this year, and our cash position remains strong at 52.8 million. I'll pause there, Martin, and happily take any questions.
Any questions? Paul, it's a sort of positive report, but one hears, in the news, the difficulties of finding NHS funding for winter, etc. And we are, relatively speaking, a small player in a fairly big pond is two ponds. Do you think there's any risk that we're going to get under more pressure to find further savings to square circle, financial circles, slightly?
Yeah, I mean, we can come on to it in part two. Obviously, there's been the release this week of the additional funding and the additional ask on systems to deliver their financial target. I think all partners within the system will be asked to do better than their current run rate positions. Okay. So I think it's inevitable that we're going to be asked to go further.
Okay, thank you. As you say, we'll have an opportunity to do it in detail in part two. Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Less of a question actually to Paul and more a bit of insight into the work being undertaken by the Trust, in particular as it relates to out of area placements. Paul had referenced an uptick really in not just the number of beds, but also the costs of out of area placements through the summer period, and that is continuing. And I think I just wanted to mention the work that's being undertaken by the Trust in that area, because it's never ending, but we continue to develop initiatives around that. And the insights I think that were developed through FIP were around the pre-commissioning of some beds that we have in the out of area placement space, which are in the private sector. And we faced the dilemma quite frequently of those beds not being able to be used because of the acuity of the patients that we have and so on and so forth. So it's a bit of square peg in a round hole. But the Trust is quite agile around being able to solve that by offering those beds, if we can't use them, to somebody else across the ICS. So I think I just want to point that out. These are the sorts of the nature of some of the challenges that we face. And the other element is around how we are trying to manage lost bed days. So this is the body of work that we've been undertaking, trying to get, again, efficient and agile around when we know somebody is clinically ready for discharge and then being able to discharge. And the insight there is that the work that the Trust is doing and it's actually around governance. So that, you can imagine we need to engage external partners in able to develop discharge pathways for individuals who are clinically ready, and the improvements that are taking place. And it's the simple things about ensuring that the right people are in the room to have those discussions amongst our partners, our external partners, to again get agile about developing those discharge pathways to ensure that we are alleviating our burden of bed space. So I just wanted to mention that, and I don't know, Paul or Debbie, if you have anything to add, please crack on.
Maybe Tamina, you?
Or Tamina, indeed.
Yeah, so thank you for highlighting that name. I think it was quite a useful conversation at FIP. Certainly the team are trying to grab hold of a number of different initiatives so that they can both reduce length of stay, make sure that the pathway and the flow through Prospect Park works well for our patients, and linking to the one teamwork, making sure that where people are known to us that an inpatient stay is part of their care or treatment plan rather than something that hadn't been anticipated. One of the challenges we have that I think has been referenced is that around 25% of the patients in our inpatient units haven't previously been known to our services. So we're trying to get under the skin of that and understand why that is. Certainly, Teresa's working really hard with the Directors of Adult Social Care so that we have the same profile of waits and delays in mental health beds that we do in our acute beds and to some extent our community hospital beds. And I think we've made some headway on that, though I suppose it's worth referencing that 3 or 4 out of our local authorities are signalling or have signalled that they're in a very difficult financial situation. So we do need to pay attention to that and whether it will have an impact on us. And again, how do we maintain the profile of mental health discharges as well as acute or community discharges? We are still likely, and this will be the bed modelling paper that we'll start to socialise with the Trust Board in more detail from December, is that it still, as I think Julian's previously said, leaves us at around 18 beds away from what we need. So with the reductions in the bed size in Prospect Park, even with the benefits that we're seeing from our length of stay and optimisation programme, we're still going to be around 18 beds adrift from what we need to. So I suppose the other thing that we're starting to think about is, what do our arrangements need to be with our independent providers so that we can guarantee to ourselves that they have the same quality, safety and outcomes and experience, and that they are accepting a range of patients that we would expect. So we're not in the situation we occasionally are now, where we have 3 or 4 beds empty, even though we have 3 or 4 patients for every single bed. So it's a quite a complex, sort of challenging area. I suppose the other thing just to notice is that the OAPS position and the challenge on beds is similar with other providers, and we need to continue to benchmark that to make sure that we're not outliers in any way.
Thank you for that, Tamina. Anything else? Paul, shall we move on to the performance report then, Paul, please?
Yeah, we can do, and I think we'll pick up in terms of a couple of the indicators touching on what we've just discussed there. So in terms of drivers, we've got the clinically ready for discharge by ward, which we've set the ambitious target for, so at 317 days loss relating to 23 patients. And as we said, there's a lot of work going on in that space in terms of focusing on work being undertaken at point of admission, as well as work in terms of trying to reduce length of stay and peer review of patients over 60 days. Again, inappropriate out-of-area placements, given the pressures that we're under, we exceeded the target for Q2 substantially, with 786 bed days used versus target of 270. On a positive note, we continue to do better than our strategic target for turnover, so turnover down at 13.6. I think if we look at the numbers across the ICS, we look to be better than others in terms of that downward trend and holding that downward trend at the moment, which is really, really positive. Self-harm, again, above target, and as we occasionally get relating to a small number of patients who've been difficult to manage and have been driving the numbers up. Obviously, colleagues continue to work on interventions and mitigations. Key work to mention around targeting NHSP bank colleagues in terms of training and review cases for overlaps with neurodiversity being a focus at the moment. In terms of tracker metrics, just looking through, obviously, acute length of stay at 64 days is high, but also reflects the fact that we're probably discharging some patients with longer length of stay, which could be seen as positive. And our mental health occupancy for both acute and non-acute patients remain high. Happy to pause there and take any questions.
Any questions? No? I just got something on the I Want Great Care, because it's you know, one of the mechanisms we get feedback on, which we can learn from and improve. And Debbie, I think I asked, it's still looking quite small. I know these things are you never get, you know, a very big number, but are we in the right direction? Are we are you happy with where we are at the moment, or is there something more we could do? I know it's a stupid question, but
no, it's not a stupid question. And yeah, I mean, I was looking actually earlier, and you know, we've got 1,000 more responses a month since April in the last month, but that still only equates to about 0.5 of a percentage. So to get to, you know, the 10% is, as I have always said, is a huge number of people. So is it going in the right direction? Yes. Are we still doing lots of work to encourage those services that aren't using it so well? Absolutely. Is it a real stretch target? Yes, it definitely is, because we're getting around about 2,500 responses at the moment a month, and that's around 3.7%. So we've got a way to go to be getting towards that 10% that we want to, but there is a lot of work going on to encourage people. What I would say is we're seeing an increasing number of services that are actually using the feedback to do something with it, which is actually at least as important. Obviously, you need to get the feedback in order to do something with it, but the fact that we've got an increasing number of services that are doing something with it and are able to say what they're doing with it, I think is also really, really important. So ongoing work, Martin, and yes, I would love it to be a bit higher.
Yeah. I think your point is well made about the teams themselves finding value in the data,
Yeah.
and therefore we want to encourage patients to complete it so they can learn from it. I think that's part of our philosophy, isn't it? Okay. Naomi, anything further on your FIP meeting, or have you covered it all?
Thanks, Martin. Just one very quick thing outside what I would call the standard agenda items, which we've covered in terms of the finances for FIP, and discussions around bed optimisation, which we've had. Just a quick one on the rather in the large study that's been undertaken on cost of living and the impact of cost of living for our staff in the southeast, in the Thames Valley. You'll recall that we engaged. This is an ICS, a Frimley ICS project led by Frimley, and it was a research. The initial phase was research, which was undertaken by Sheffield Hallam University and the University of Huddersfield. They did all the heavy lifting around data mining and getting under the skins of the cost of housing in particular, and also the sort of availability and cost of public transportation with the two big themes. And the research is complete and the data has been gathered. PwC was supporting in some of that work. Jane at the last FIP gave some insights into where we are. And I think the sort of punchline, if you were, is that as perhaps as we might expect, this piece of work hasn't really revealed anything we didn't know already. And I would expect Jane you to jump in here at any moment. And we didn't really expect it to. I mean, but the more insightful piece is that we now have data that supports that, which is a good thing. In terms of the go forward, there've been numerous conversations across the ICS to try and conclude what we might derive from the data and information. And it now seems to be centering around what, if anything, can we do as a trust or more broadly as an ICS in terms of finding or supporting our staff around accommodation. That's the big ticket item. The data reveals, again, unexpectedly, that we have a huge gap between affordable housing for our staff and the availability of affordable housing and how our staff are paid. And it's exacerbated in many ways by the lack of public transportation that's kind of on offer and available to staff that kind of dovetails nicely with where they live and where they work. So with that, there's no silver bullet. We know and understand that. We as a trust, I think, have had some peripheral, some early conversations about what we might do in terms of provision of accommodation. That's very tricky because our estate really doesn't offer it in a way that's kind of conducive. So there may be something that more discussions to be had more broadly at the ICS level. Jane. Is Jane with us?
Yes, I am here. Yeah, I think that's a fair summary of what we've done on that work there. Absolutely. I think the only thing I would highlight is that tension between some of the eco agenda and the workforce agenda as well, and the fact that we're trying more and more to take people out of cars, and actually for our staff living in areas where we don't have access to car parking and things like that means that they have to live in areas which are more expensive, because housing with good transport links is more expensive than housing without. It also limits where they can live because they have to live within the confines of bus routes, and the bus routes sometimes take longer to get in.
Thank you for that. And I just echo that, Jane, in terms of public transport. I mean, it's really important that we try and support public transport to places where our staff can afford to live. And just on the ICS thing, which I'm sure it's very welcome, but we need to make sure this is something we do with Bob jointly with Frimley. So if it's anything that's just done is done across our whole patch, not just within one ICS.
Yeah, and Martin, this was a really good example of a joint piece of work between both Frimley and Bob.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Okay. In which case, thank you very much, Naomi. We'll move on. the strategy now, important issue now, item 9, the National 6 Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Actions and the Progress Report. And I'll hand over to Alex and welcome Ash Ellis, who's here somewhere on my screen.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin, and welcome also to Stephanie Winter, who supported drafting of the report. Thanks to Ash and Stephanie. So the context of this is the National EDI Improvement Plan for the NHS was published in June 23. I was glad to see along the workforce focused actions, we're not going from a standing start here, and you can see in the report a range of initiatives that are already impacting our plan to impact in these national actions. We had identified key issues across these 6 actions already, so as an assurance to the board that we're not out of line as to where kind of the national view of our focus should be for workforce. The EDI objectives for board members, we've had some shaping discussion in the board previously and in committee. I'm looking to agree those proposals with you, and we will share those publicly once we have done that as a board. The international recruitment support, we know we have a relatively smaller cohort of international recruits compared to other larger organisations or acute trusts, but that said, we've made some really good progress there too, with pastoral support awards representing the high quality support we put in to our international recruits. I think I'd focus the board to one of the key areas, which is around bullying, harassment and discrimination for the workforce, and a major component of our anti-racism strategy is focused there, but also is focused beyond the workforce inclusion issues into our health inequality. So we're not just focusing to workforce, as this plan is nationally, but we're also looking around the inclusion aspects for our communities and patients. So again, a broader strategic lens we have in which these workforce actions sit. And I'm just going to introduce Ash then to bring forward any particular highlights, Ash, across those 6 actions, and then we can have some discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Alex. I think as well, just to reiterate what Alex said, it's helpful to have this framework nationally, but it's great to see that we're doing this work anyway. So pleasing to see we have activity underway and planned under all 6 actions. I think, again, it's just important to reiterate what we're trying to address for all this work. It's not just our public sector equality duty, what we're obliged to do, but what is the right thing to do, what will enable our colleagues and patients to have the best possible experience. I think I just want to highlight as well the majority of this work underway has been informed by our data, so our quantitative and qualitative. So it's been co-produced with our staff networks. I just want to point out as well, we have a big piece of work which hopefully a lot of you are aware on with our anti-racism strategy, and that cuts across all of these. And we know anti-racist action will also provide wider benefits for inclusion and with that intersectionality lens as well. I think we've got quite strong work going on against all of the actions, and good to acknowledge improvements, but I think also just to say we're not yet where we want to be. I think there's definitely areas and work to do. No gaps as such against any of the actions from my perspective, but I think, as Alex has highlighted, there is, I think, stronger work to do around bullying and harassment. Some of the pay gap recommendations, aligned to mend the gap. I think I put an example there around actually we could promote flexible working to appeal to men to increase the percentage of men that work less than full time, for example. I think that's probably all I'll highlight, and just take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ash. Any questions? Sally.
Ash, can I just ask you about disability? I understand our reporting is quite low in terms of disclosure, but I also wondered if we'd have anything around reasonable adjustments and supporting managers to make reasonable adjustments, and any work stream around that. Because from my experience, there's often a gap there. At a sort of strategic level, we have a commitment, but when it comes to the practicalities, managers need a bit of support in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we started a QI project in this space, particularly around the length of time it takes for people, to get the equipment and needs that they need to do their roles essentially, and the kind of time it takes in the procurement timescale. So that's one thing we're looking at. We know 80% of people in the from the staff survey feel that their adjustments are being met. And we're also embedding it within our leadership and management program as well. So our managers are going to become better aware of how to support staff in that space as well.
May I just add, we did some focus work with our managers around a guide developed for how you engage in the reasonable adjustment conversation, which was one of the blocks. Actually, there wasn't a confidence around disability and understanding people's needs to do well at work. We also set up a centralised budget for reasonable adjustments, which took away another block around budgetary management. So some good progress, and it is reflected in that 80% score. We want to do better, and good to hear of the QI work.
No, that sounds good. Thank you.
Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, Ash. Just a quick, I'm absolutely sure you've got this in your lexicon of activities, but it's about celebrating success. This is an area that we all know can feel a bit turgid and a bit uphill. If we're not careful, the tone can get a bit turgid and uphill as well. So I'm just keen to understand what your thinking is around celebrating success. We have a plethora of actions and outcomes that are deserving of celebration, and how you go about that.
Yes, great question. And actually, I've had quite a few conversations around what some of the issues are in some of this space in the work. And it's one of the problems I see that we don't do enough in the organisation. That's around closing the feedback loop and changing perception. So I think having much greater transparency and communication into the organisation around what we are doing is needed across all of our work streams. So every work stream, that's what we are trying to do. We've got quite clear communications input with things like our anti-racism work now. We're doing it around reasonable adjustments. Our leadership and management offer those types of things. So yeah, absolutely. We need to be conscious of things, how things communicated, or indeed how they're not, if that makes sense.
I agree. Rebecca.
Hi, thanks, Ash. Really good work. I just wanted to say, just following on from what Naomi was saying, actually, just about that, the positive messages and the continual positive reinforcement. So for various reasons I won't bore you with, I've only just been able to attend my induction, and Julian was there, and he sort of gave his intro at the beginning of that. So it's really interesting to experience that on, inverted commas, the other side of the fence, and it was really positive and impactful on me as an individual, hearing Julian talk about the launch of the anti-racism strategy, but more specifically, he was able to give an example of something that we've done differently around not accepting racist behaviour from a patient, and sort of how we've taken a stand there. So I think just to encourage that, as an individual hearing that message, it really did make an impact. The other thing I was going to say is just looking at the ethnicity pay gap report. One of the things it says in there is about, before sort of developing strategy and actions, the trust wants to engage as a statistician to understand some of that data better. Has that happened, or is that still in train?
It's in train, so we'll start some early conversations with people who we can bring in, but it is definitely still something we want to do and just get better understanding of our data, really.
Yeah. And then a related point on data. So one of the things that we had committed to do was to make sure that NEDs had completed their data. So I tried to do that, and I actually had to enlist some help. It's not very easy to do. And I think Naomi mentioned this when we talked about it previously at the board meeting. And I do think if we want people to complete the data, we need to make it as easy as possible. And it currently isn't easy. So I wonder if that's something that we can look at. And secondly, it was a slight concern that I'd been marked down as, not wanting to disclose, as opposed to simply having not completed it. So that's that's very misleading to the way we're reading that data around people who effectively are falling into that prefer not to say category when that's not the case. So I don't know whether we need to maybe explore who's entering that data at the time, because obviously somebody had entered it on my behalf because I hadn't done that, because I wouldn't have selected that category. So, and with that, we know the importance of data to try and get to the bottom of and change some of these things, and some of those big numbers where we've got it's creating a blind spot or skewing the ability to assess those numbers. So I don't know whose remit that sits within to sort of explore that further.
Yeah, so it's a good point, and we do need to make it easier. And I think sometimes ESR doesn't help us with some of these things, so we need to make that more easier to navigate, and the support available for colleagues to do that. I think that the point you raised, secondly, the quality monitoring forms, I think that are done at recruitment, that's something we can kind of take back and review and explore, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's, because I know the system to a certain extent, we've got some tram lines and we can't rebuild the software, but even if it's just a little video with slides to show you, actually it's this extra window and then this extra drop down, and you need to click on this to even get the drop down, that would have made it a little bit more accessible.
Rebecca, if you're like me, as you know, I'm an expert on technology, but I went to Jane's colleague who just told me which buttons to press, because ESR is just it's a previous generation of software, I think. But,
yeah.
But the data point is a very important point in terms of understanding. And I think, because I've had discussions with Ash about medians and means of these things, and you can very easily get yourself into a sort of just a mass of data and lose the message underneath it. So I think if we can get some help to help us draw out what it really means, that'd be really helpful in this domain. Julian.
Yeah, thanks very, very much. I do agree with Naomi's point about the feedback loop. Sometimes I'm getting people saying to me, oh, we haven't done anything about this, and actually we have, and I'm saying, oh no, we've actually, 3 years ago that was right, but it's now improved. Of course, I think we should be saying what we've done, and if we have no impact or it's gone backwards, we should be equally as transparent, but at least just putting what actions we have attempted to take and the impact of those, I think is really important. I think a good part of the organisation is not up to speed with the current state, if you like. And then my other sort of, it's a question or comment really, Ash, and I don't want to put you in a difficult spot, but there's quite a lot of things that come out nationally. So the NHS EDI improvement plan, but we have the patient and carers mental health initiative, and we've got RES, we've got DARES, we've got a lot of stuff that's sort of going on. It's certainly bamboozling many folk in the organisation. And of course, what we want to do is, in terms of ED&I, is identify the biggest issues that we face and do something about them positively to make an improvement. Is this all helping us, or are you behind the scenes sort of hardwiring it, trying to join it up and making it simple? Because for many, seniorish managers, not the most senior, they're going to find these raft of sort of potentially additional templates not necessarily that helpful to actually do the real work. Where do you sit on this, and what approach do you think we need to take?
It's a great question, Julian. I think tools and frameworks can be very helpful in terms of helping navigate. I think ED&I is such a complex area. I think this is why organisations, not just in the NHS or public, all different sectors, struggle to get things right and make things work. And there's not just one thing that works right. But I think people have to start with the problem. I think it's acknowledging, and let's be clear, we're being clear about it with our approaches. We're acknowledging that there is racism, there is discrimination, and we need people to understand this. So therefore, whatever approach we take, for me, it's about go back to earlier. We need to meet our public sector equality duty, but it's about doing the right thing. So for us, if we do the right thing and then we're ticking and kind of checking in against the national frameworks as well, then that's a plus.
I was going to say our vision affords us a really significant opportunity to align this work in ways that are meaningful for the organisation, starting with the problem, but aligning to that vision, how it helps us deliver any action on inclusion, equality and diversity. But if we're driven by, national narratives and descriptors, we will struggle to engage the organisation.
I think I'll nail my colours to the mast. I think on this one, my view, my experience in other organisations is that if you do the right thing, you almost always tick all the boxes that your lords and masters are wanting you to do. And you've sort of seen this here, though it's not perfect, because we've been doing the right thing, actually, we're able to tick lots of these boxes. And there is a danger we can get into a tail chase where we just follow the latest memo from head office. And whilst that, some of those, of course, are really important, but whilst they may be good guidance, we mustn't get off the fact that we've got to do the right thing, and we learn from whatever we can, of course, but we do the right thing. I'm just going to say a few summary up things. I think it's great work, and thank you, Ash, and to your colleagues for what's going on, to Jane. I am attracted to this idea that someone mentioned earlier about the health inequalities issue for our patients and our staff. It's all part of the same continuum. So we need to sort of look at that as a holistic thing. Communication, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right on feeding back, not in a self-congratulatory way, but as Julian said, in an honest way, but so people actually know. And many staff, of course, at least one can forget, at least I can forget, what they work nights or they're very junior, they don't have access to some of the IT and things like that, and so it gets more difficult for them to hear the message and indeed feed into the system. I think it's very interesting, the Black History Month event I went to recently, listening to some of the black staff. There's still things, and even though I try and do it all the time, there's still things I didn't understand from the cultural differences and things, and it's really useful to understand, get beneath the surface of some of this where we can. And finally, our commitment to this is absolutely real. It's anti-racism and EDI strategy. And I think we've got to make sure that it's continuum. It's not just a one-off and you sort of think we've done that. This is a continuing thing which we're going to go on and on until the problem is solved. And clearly it's not just for us, it's for society as a whole as well. But we have to have that long-term commitment to this issue. So staff know we're really serious about this and we're not just going to let it fall away. Look, Ash, thanks for you and your colleagues and in the networks, and onwards and upwards. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, I think let's get my computer to respond. Right, Audit Committee. Rajiv.
Thanks, Martin. I think it was minutes are in the pack, page 95. It was a fairly standard month this time round, with the exception that we approved the charity annual report and accounts. That was the main difference this time round. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No. Okay. Trust seal, Paul.
Thank you, Martin. So just to note that the trust seal was applied to 2 leases, one for Resource House and 20 Denmark Street. They are in fact one in the same property. It's just the way the leases were negotiated, and this is the new facility that we've got in Wokingham that replaces the old forge, which we moved out of in October.
Okay, thank you very much. Council of Governors update. We're continuing induction for new governors because we had a lot of new governors, which is that's going well and they're very engaged. I'm pleased that the governor visits are proving good insight into the services they're visiting, and they're very keen to do more, and also very pleased that the feedback seems to be very positive, the commitment of our staff, which is great. And also the governor's interest in quality matters. So the governors are really seized with seeing that, and they get a lot of data. We give them a lot of data, and they're finding this really helpful to get underneath the skin of the organisation and be able to relate back to their own geographical areas or their own areas of interest. So I think that's all going really rather well. Item 11, any other business from anyone? The date of the next meeting is the 12th of December. And I'm just wondering if our observers, Yvonne or Tom, have got any comments on the meeting or questions? Don't have to.
Fab presentation at the start, really good, which I think the governors would be interested in.
Yeah.
I thought the discussion on EDI was very interesting because it's been a long story. I mean, it's a continuing effort, but we're now seeing it extending to staff and patients being discussed together, which I think is really, really interesting and very positive.
Thank you, Tom. Yvonne, you don't have to say anything, Yvonne, but if you...
That's right. Found it very, very informative, and having been part of some of the work that's happening, it's really good to actually see how it all comes together and how you can relate. I was also at the REN event, and I think there's quite a lot to celebrate and to actually appraise. So maybe going back to that same message about we do a lot of work, but we don't bring it up, or we don't do that feedback loop. So often people will say, well, this still isn't happening. And it's how do we bring that to the forefront and celebrate and keep the message going through constantly. I know we do get the message out, but it's how do you keep it constantly going and appraising it. And my other thing was to talk about the research. I think we talked a little bit about the research and actually found that really fascinating and wondered how much work actually has happened. I mean, I've been in the trust for about 12 years. I do know about research, but actually didn't know about all of the stuff that's happening. So again, I know it's probably not my personal interest research, but actually found it really interesting as a mental health nurse. Never used to find stuff about research. Actually, is there anything that as people who are maybe practicing in that space would want to actually do as a trust rather than waiting for other people to come in and say, we want to do the research. But no, fabulous. I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. In which case we'll adopt our normal resolution to exclude press and public from the remainder of the meeting. And thank you, everyone. I think